So, how do you like my roadkill shirt? Came out just as I was planning. Okay, no, in reality, I was trying to reproduce the really cool Moiré art of Pat Kim design, which I found on Instagram. Super cool stuff, but clearly I need a little bit more work. Thankfully, that's not actually the subject of today's video. I just needed an excuse to use flexible filament to make this tool. And the reason I wanted to do that was to test all of these printers, which I have behind me. Here we've got the Artillery Sidewinder X1, which I've already reviewed. We have its successor, the Artillery Genius. And then over here we have the Sovol SV01. The reason I wanted to review these three printers together is because these are all direct drive printers. For those of you who aren't familiar, there are two basic configurations when it comes to 3D printing extruders for hobby-style FDM machines. First, there's this Bowden-style extruder, where you have the extruder gears off to the side of the printer, which is connected to this flexible PTFE tube, and that tube is connected to the hot end and the nozzle of the printer. So your filament is fed in right here, and then those extruding gears will push the filament the rest of the way down into the hot end, where it gets melted and prints out to make your part. The second type of extruder is this direct drive extruder. And the difference here is that we have the extruder gear mounted directly above the hot end and the nozzle. So with this style, the filament has a much shorter path to travel before it gets melted down. By now, I think I can safely say that I'm a bigger fan of direct drive printers. For one thing, I find direct drive works a lot better for printing in flexible materials because it's less likely that the material jams before it gets into the hot nozzle. But not only that, I've been noticing a lot of the most common problems that I hear about people having with their first 3D printers has to do with the Bowden tube system, either causing under extrusion or the PTFE tube not going all the way into the hot end and causing jams inside of there. It's pretty common, and I've had very few of those issues here with the direct drive printer, and when I do run into under extrusion, it's a lot easier to fix. I'll get into that a bit more, as well as just comparing these three printers and showing you all the cool stuff that I've printed using them. That's what's in today's video, so let's get right to it. Cool. That's right, I am wearing this hideous t-shirt for the rest of this review. Let me just say right off the bat, I've been thoroughly enjoying every single one of these printers, and I've used them pretty much exclusively for the past 6 months because I like them so much and because they've been so pleasant to work with. So I could actually see myself recommending each one of these to the right person. Besides the fact that these are all direct drive printers, they actually have a whole lot in common. Just seeing these three printers side by side, you'll already start to see some similarities in the way they're constructed. They all have this same general CR10 style frame, and in the case of the Artillery Genius, well, it's pretty much a direct successor to the Sidewinder, which was Artillery's flagship printer. And as far as the Sovol SV01, I'd be surprised if it wasn't pretty directly inspired by the success of the Sidewinder as well. All three of these machines have dual Z-axis steppers, which are meant to help with the accuracy in the Z direction, although only the Artillery printers have this Z belt on the top, which is also meant to help with Z accuracy, although there's some debate over how much those really help. All three also hold the filament above the printer for this top-loaded configuration. They all have filament runout sensors, as well as power resume functionality in case there's a power outage. When it comes to the direct drive extruder itself, all three printers are also pretty similar. They have this nice big wheel that you can use to manually feed the filament in, and they all have this screw which you can turn to adjust the tension of the gear against the filament. And that's what I was alluding to earlier in terms of dealing with under extrusion, because here you can just turn that screw until there's a really good grip on the filament, and that'll usually take care of any under extrusion issues. Here on the SV01, you can see we have a pretty similar configuration, but it's kind of flipped around so that the extruding gear is back here, a little bit harder to reach, but the filament tension adjustment is on the front, so that's a lot easier to adjust than on the Artillery machines. Another thing that's pretty nice about all three of these machines is that they output 24 volts, and that means much faster bed heating than a lot of older 12-volt printers. On the Sidewinder, it took about 1 minute and 20 seconds to get the bed up to 70 degrees Celsius. Pretty impressive, but that's blown out of the water by the Genius, which was able to get up to 70 degrees in only 20 seconds. That's wild. Then there's the SV01, which definitely lagged behind a bit. It took over 4 minutes to reach 70 degrees Celsius. Although when you compare that to the CR10, which takes over 10 minutes to reach that temperature, it's still a nice improvement over older printers. All three printers also feature these nice big leveling knobs for easy manual leveling of the print beds. And they all feature one of my favorite print surfaces, which is a glass bed with an ultra base coating. Although only the SV01 surface is removable. And it should be noted that not all ultra base is created equal. While the Artillery printers have given me consistently excellent print bed adhesion, I did run into some problems with the SV01 print surface. For example, here's one of my first all-night prints on the SV01. A nice classic batch of spaghetti. That said, all I had to do was coat the build plate with some glue stick, and that more or less took care of my build plate adhesion problems. At the time of making this review, I found the Sidewinder for sale from $380 up to $500, the Genius from $350 up to $420, and the SV01 here from $300 to $320, making this the cheapest one. When it comes to build volume, we have a nice big 300 by 300 by 400 millimeter build volume here, same as the CR10 printers. Here on the Artillery Genius, things got shrunken down and we have a 220 by 220 by 250 millimeter build volume. And the SV01 here sits somewhere in the middle with a 280 by 240 by 300 millimeter build volume. So that's a rectangular bed, weirdly enough. The Artillery printers here have a bit of a one-up when it comes to the nozzle because they use a volcano system, which is a longer metal hot end, which allows you to print faster and with more materials. Although I've got to say, printing up to 60 millimeters per second, all three of these printers kept up. And honestly, I usually print closer to 40 or 45 millimeters per second because I prioritize quality over speed. Also, when it comes to sound levels, the Artillery printers are super silent. No, I didn't turn off the volume. These printers really are this quiet. And the same can't really be said for the SV01. So if you're thinking of printing in a bedroom or somewhere where you just don't want it to be noisy, these printers are really excellent for that purpose. These two also have a full color touchscreen, whereas the SV01 has more of an old school LCD and a knob on it. So it's definitely less glamorous than these two, but you're also saving a lot of money. And I do have to say, when it comes to print quality, all three of these are very excellent. I'd give them all 5 stars in terms of print quality, in the sense that they can all make amazing, amazing prints. And if I'm trying to nitpick, it's kind of tricky because it might just come down to my personal slicer settings. But if I had to rank these printers in terms of print quality, I would say that the SV01 actually had the best print quality. It's been almost flawless, just like really clean layers. The Z is like perfect. I'm staring at this right now and I have no complaints for print quality. And this is a $300 printer. So that's amazing. And it's what a lot of people have been saying the Ender 3 Pro should have been. After that, I would say the quality of the Sidewinder X1 is maybe a little bit lower, but also nothing that I would ever really complain about because it's still spectacular. And I've also gotten really, really spectacular, amazing prints off of the Artillery Genius, but I will say it's been less consistent. Some of my prints have shown very clear Z banding, and it's actually really weird because sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Again, it might have to do with specific layer heights being more effective or just other slicer settings that I somehow got wrong. But yeah, I have had some Z-banding issues on the Genius, which is weird because they were touting this proprietary new system for the coupler of the Z, but I guess new systems have more likelihood of going wrong, right? They're less tested and true. But yeah, I would definitely say all three of these printers are very capable at printing high quality prints. If you recall my Sidewinder review, there were only two kind of problems I really had. One was I didn't like the top loading spool holder because you had to use an Allen key to adjust the width if you wanted to put on spools from different brands of filament or things like that. They fixed that with the Genius by having a quick adjustment knob. It's still a little bit finicky, but definitely works a lot better. And as you can see, I kept the top loading spool holder for the Genius, whereas for the X1 here, I replaced it with one from another printer. But you can also 3D print your own spool holder. It's not that big of a deal. I'll also mention that people have had complaints about the ribbon cables on these Artillery printers, saying that they're overly sensitive and unnecessary. I haven't had any problems besides the fact that when I first installed the Sidewinder X1 here, one of the pins on the ribbon cable was bent wrong and I fixed it and got it to work. Didn't cause any problems, but it could have caused a problem. They also included spare cables with the original printer, so if something did go wrong, I'd be able to replace it quickly without any cost or anything. I can't really speak to other people's experiences, but personally, I've used the Sidewinder here for over a year, and these two I've had for over 6 months, and I haven't had any problems with the cables or really anything. Now, as I said, one of the main selling points of a direct drive printer is its ability to print with a lot of different materials, especially flexible filaments, which Bowden style printers can have a lot of trouble printing. And that's also where these two brands of printer kind of stand apart, because with the Artillery printers, both the Genius and the Sidewinder, I was able to print some really fantastic flexible parts. I used both Filamentums flexible filament, which is a pretty stiff but flexible filament, but I also printed with Ninja Flex filament, which is super flexible, about as flexible of a filament as you can get for your standard 3D printer. And while I've always had trouble with Ninja Flex, these two printers were able to pull it off really well. But when it comes to the Sovol SV01, I had no such luck. Even with Filamentums flexible filament, which I have been able to print on CR10s and other Bowden style printers, the Sovol SV01 was not able to print with it. I found the filament getting tangled up in that small space between the extrusion gear and the hot end. So, if you are looking to print with flexible filaments, I would say no to the SV01, and I would say yes to these two Artillery printers. That said, flexible filaments were the only filaments that I had trouble printing on with the Sovol SV01. So how about now we just do a bit of show and tell. I'll give you some nice close-up looks at all of these different models I've printed on all of these different printers and all of these different materials, and you can see for yourself what the prints coming off of these machines look like. First, let's take a look at these tissue box covers that were printed using vase mode, which is known for creating really easy and clean prints. But I was using a 1mm extrusion width, which does test how quickly these printers can pump out filament. Here's the part that came off of the Sidewinder. It looks pretty much flawless. And the same goes for the one printed on the Sovol SV01. When it comes to the Genius, there are some very slight Z artifacts that you can see upon close inspection, but in general, it's still a really nice print. Most of my recent Astrolabicon puzzles were also printed on these printers. These were printed with silk transition filament. And we've also got these really nice ones printed using Polyalchemy's Elixir PLA. While these silk type filaments do tend to show layer lines more, I also feel like they print really smooth and they just look so darn good. Here's a chain puzzle where the left side was printed on the Sidewinder and the right side was printed on the Genius. So you can see they're pretty comparable, but yeah, maybe a little bit worse on the Genius side. Here's a nice functional print I did on the Artillery Genius. And again, you can see some Z-layer artifacts, but this one came out pretty clean. And in terms of dimensional accuracy, I'd say the Genius is definitely still really good. But then again, looking at this print on the SV01 using the same filament, it's definitely a bit cleaner. Here I was making a nice little photo booth button for my sister's wedding. And here is yet another beautiful PLA print on the Sovol SV01, which I combined with a flexible part printed on the Artillery Genius. Here I was making a new stamp, which I used to brand my outgoing packages. Here's another cool Ninja Flex print I did on the Artillery Genius, which I've got to share because it was a fun little experiment making this one-way valve. So it was actually printed as a solid part. And then I went ahead and added the slits using an X-Acto knife, so they're kind of self-closing. I glued that on the end of this acrylic tube, and a few days later, I took it out to the pond to see if it can hold water. As you see here, well, it's not completely watertight, but it's doing something, and at least the turtle seems to like it. Here's a phone case that I'm printing out on the Sovol SV01 using MatterHacker's Rhino filament. And you can see I've got really good bed adhesion here, so once I used some glue stick on the print bed, I really wasn't having any more bed adhesion problems on this printer. Now here's the print that really sold me on the SV01. This is an ABS print, and yes, I did put a bag over the printer as a makeshift heated enclosure, but other than that, I didn't do anything special, and I was just floored by the result of this print. This is undoubtedly one of the smoothest ABS prints I've ever gotten off of any machine. I used the same generic ABS to print out these little clips so that I could stick my tablet on top of my Mac, because you can never have enough screens. And I also printed out this replacement cover for my router. And this would normally be a really tricky ABS print, but it stuck down nicely, and those little tabs printed out really well. There we go, works perfectly. And here's one that I printed out on the Artillery Genius, which also came out pretty much flawlessly. Here's another print on the Genius, once again using that MatterHacker's Rhino material, and this was a big chunky solid piece, and once again it printed out quite nicely. Here's another ABS print that I did on the Sidewinder, and this one came out looking pretty much perfect. I printed the same model using Filamentum's CPE material, which had a bit of stringing, but it also printed quite nicely. Here on the SV01, I'd say it was a bit more successful. I also gave it a shot on the Artillery Genius, and this one definitely had the most stringing of the three, though it's likely that I just had to increase my retraction settings a bit, and I probably could have gotten a nice clean print. If you're wondering what this print is, it's a little converter for these serger spools, which let me use it on a standard home sewing machine. It's a nice little functional print, so I can buy my thread in bulk and save some money in the long run. Finally, I tested out PETG on all three printers by printing out some of these 3D Werkstatt face shields. And I did print these using draft settings, so they didn't look pristine, but they all did print out successfully, and they look more or less the same. Pretty impressive stuff, right? Hopefully you can see now why I'm a fan of all three of these printers, and this is just a fraction of everything I've printed with these machines. They've been going hard for the last 6+ months. So in terms of being workhorse printers, I approve of all of them. The Artillery printers do have some premium features. The bed is a little bit better. They are definitely a lot quieter. Things like that can certainly be nice to some people. But the Sovol SV01 prints just as well, if not slightly better, when it comes to print quality, and it's cheaper. So that's why I say I might recommend each of these printers to a different person. If you don't mind the noise, save $100 and go for the Sovol SV01. Or for example, if you know that you don't need the 300 by 300 by 400 millimeter build volume of the Artillery X1, then you might as well go for the smaller Artillery Genius, which has some upgraded features. Okay, so the final thing that people always want to know is, if I were to buy my first printer, knowing what I know now, which printer would it be? Speaking for myself, I think I would go with the Artillery Sidewinder X1. And that's because, well, it does have the large build volume, which I might like to use. It supports flexible filaments and all the other types of filaments that I used, which I might also like. So in terms of just a great all-around printer that can do a lot of different things, I think this is the most versatile over here. But if I was just going for really high quality PLA or ABS prints, then the Sovol SV01 would be a very attractive printer, especially since it's $200 less. And like I said, the Genius might be perfect for some of you as well. If you are printing smaller things, but you want that silent printing experience, then there you go. Artillery Genius is a very great printer. Yeah, all right, that's all I've got to say for today. Hopefully this was a helpful review. As always, I'll put links in the description to all three of these printers, as well as STL files for these cool things I've printed. If you don't know, when you use the links in the description of my videos, or pretty much any YouTuber out there, those are affiliate links, so I get a little bit of a commission at no extra cost to you. So if you want to support my channel and you're already planning on getting any of these printers, I would very much appreciate that. Keeps the channel going. All right, cool. I'm happy about that. I always love being able to review printers that are good. I find that a lot more useful than reviewing crappy printers, right? And I've got to say, there's so many more good printers out there, and percentage-wise, a lot more of the printers that are out there are good printers. It used to be a pretty big junkyard out there, but as you can see, now you have a lot of options that are all really good. All right, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm excited to see what all of you print with your new fancy printers if you end up getting one of these. And, well, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, I'm Devin, this is Make Anything, and as always, stay inspired.